Breaking news, Manitoba under a state of emergency. The raging wildfires racing through the province this Wednesday night.
This is the largest evacuation Manitoba will have seen in most people's living memory.
The new Prime Minister's first question period, what Mark Carney faced.
Our plan includes legislating for one Canadian economy.
Plus, what's missing from his spending plan and how it differs from Justin Trudeau's. A new clue in the case of two Nova Scotia children missing for nearly a month.
Every tip counts.
What police are now asking the public to do. And buried, the glacier that collapsed and swallowed up a Swiss village.
Global National with Dawna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. There is breaking news tonight. A state of emergency has been declared for the entire province of Manitoba because of wildfires. And people in a number of northern communities, including Flin Flon, have been told to leave their homes by midnight and head south to Winnipeg.
Evacuation orders have been issued for the city of Flin Flon, the communities of Pimichigamak Cree Nation, Puckatawagan Cree Nation, and the Northern Affairs community of Cross Lake. All told, we're looking at about 17,000 people in northern communities that are being evacuated from their homes over the next few hours.
Fires are spreading rapidly in northern and eastern Manitoba, and one is threatening Flin Flon, home to 5,000 people. The Canadian Armed Forces have now been called in to help with evacuation efforts. Out-of-control fires are raging in nearly all areas of Manitoba, putting a strain on emergency resources. The fire near Flin Flon started in Saskatchewan. Manitoba's premier has said hotels in his province are at capacity, and evacuees who go to Winnipeg will be housed at large facilities, including soccer fields and arenas. And in Saskatchewan, two fires burning in Narrow Hills Provincial Park have merged now, creating one massive blaze. Nearby resort communities there are under threat. Cities like Saskatoon are taking in evacuees, including residents from the northeastern village of Pelican Narrows. And hot and dry conditions in Alberta are fueling a wildfire that's threatening the town of Swan Hills. 1,300 people there were forced out on Monday night. That fire has also halted some oil production in the area. Much of Alberta is under a heat warning today. In the nation's capital, Parliament got back to business today, and though it's a new session with a new Prime Minister and lots of new MPs, it all sounded pretty familiar. There were lots of barbed questions and not many straight answers. For Mark Carney, it's all a new experience.
Could you also indulge me to say how great it is to see you in the Speaker's chair, and I trust that you're operating under the period of grace that will not be accorded to me.
Something else is different this session. The Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, is absent because he failed to win his seat in the last election. Mackenzie Gray reports on the new political dynamic in Parliament.
It was the latest test for the rookie Prime Minister.
Oral questions.
After some rarely seen collegiality.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to welcome the Prime Minister to his first official question period.
The first parliamentary battle of 2025 began. Mark Carney versus the Conservatives' number 2, Andrew Scheer.
If he's the man with the plan and the guy you hire in a crisis, why won't he table a budget before he goes on summer vacation?
Our plan includes legislating for one Canadian economy and nation-building projects immediately to grow this economy, and we expect the support from all in this House.
Scheer taking a slightly softer tone.
Stronger stance from this government against
compared to the man he's filling in for, a seatless Pierre Poilievre.
I'd love to be in there. It's a great place. I love the House of Commons.
The right honourable Prime Minister.
Carney appearing calm and not reading off a script when answering. But when the Conservatives attacked on housing and natural resources, new Liberal ministers seem to have first-day jitters.
Mr. Speaker, while my Conservative colleagues are interested in playing politics, I'm interested in getting things built, including pipelines where there is consensus.
While Carney avoided a major stumble, multiple Liberal staff have told Global News they're worried about how Carney will handle question period after numerous pointed interactions between Carney and journalists on the campaign. The bloc focusing on tariffs. And since they and the Conservatives are the only two official opposition parties, they'll get even more questions compared to the last Parliament, leaving the NDP to pick up the scraps.
Well, our party has been allocated by the Speaker 7 questions a week. Okay. So we're going to have at least one question every day, sometimes 2.
But there's limited opposition optimism that Carney will give substantive responses.
I think he should break with tradition and answer the question that's asked as completely as possible.
Do you think he'll do that?
No.
Carney took 8 questions in the House, Dawna, breaking from a tradition that Justin Trudeau set, where during Wednesday's question period, the Prime Minister would respond to all the questions of the day.
Okay, Mackenzie, thanks. Prime Minister Carney has said his government will not present a federal budget until the fall. That doesn't mean it's not spending any money, though. Plans worth $468 billion have been tabled in Parliament. David Akin is taking a closer look at what's in them and what's missing. David.
Well, Dawna, the spending plan tabled in Parliament this week gives Canadians really the first outline of how the Carney government's finances will be different from the Trudeau government.
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mark Carney promised more fiscal discipline, and he plans to spend $486 billion this year. That's about the same as the Trudeau government did last year. But even that is too much for the Conservatives.
Just like Justin Trudeau, Mark Carney's spending is absolutely out of control. In fact, it's worse.
This week's spending plan is certain to change in the fall once it is updated with the $24 billion in new spending commitments the Liberals made during the election campaign. The plan really is a first step, a baseline, and one required to essentially keep the government's lights on. Still, MPs will be asked to vote on it without the benefit of having a budget, which would detail how the government plans to raise the revenue for all this spending.
With the economic storm clouds moving in, how is it possible not to have a budget this spring?
Moreover, MPs will be asked to vote on this spending with few details about it, though the government promises ministers will provide details later.
There will be extensive examination with ministers being accountable for those sums in the House of Commons, more than that has ever occurred in recent memory.
Now, MPs will have to vote on this spending plan, and it will be a matter of confidence, although almost no one expects the government to fall when that vote comes sometime in June. Dawna.
All right, David Akin, thank you. One of the biggest spends will be on defense. NATO is moving to hike its target for defense spending from 2% of member countries' GDP to 5%. And Prime Minister Carney has said he wants to join a plan to rearm Europe by July 1st. And then there's President Trump's plan to build a Golden Dome missile defense shield, which he said yesterday will cost Canada $61 billion, unless Canada becomes the 51st state. Mercedes Stevenson reports.
Prime Minister Mark Carney isn't taking the bait when it comes to U.S. President Donald Trump's latest comments.
Never negotiate in public.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Speaking in Ottawa, Trump's own former Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, implied the renewed rhetoric is simply a negotiating tactic.
Why do you think he's bringing it up now?
He's the consummate deal maker.
And that Canada should take the long view.
Canada ought to trust the United States. We have deep, long, lasting relationships. They expand far beyond any presidential administration.
This country's newly minted defense minister, David McGuinty, delivered his inaugural speech at Canada's largest military trade show Wednesday, emphasizing the government's commitment to increase defense spending and faster procurement.
A new government was elected some 4 short weeks ago, and having run on a platform to strengthen Canada's sovereignty and security,
McGuinty made it clear Canada is looking beyond just the U.S., highlighting the plan to sign on to a $1.25 trillion defense market in Europe as part of the plan to rearm European militaries since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Something the international defense industry, which has struggled to compete against firms in Canada, are welcoming.
We want to work closer with Canada, with not only the government but also the Canadian industry, so this creates huge opportunities for us.
Defense insiders say the government will continue to cooperate and work with the U.S. on continental defense as a reality of geography and shared history. And while Trump's comments on the Golden Dome may sound shocking, at the end of the day, they're hardly final.
Seems like an awfully precise number for a pretty loosely defined project still. There's a whole lot of engineering work.
Mercedes Stevenson, Global News, Ottawa.
An American court has sentenced the ringleader of a human smuggling plot across the Canada-U.S. border to 10 years in prison. Harsh Kumar Patel was convicted last fall of smuggling migrants between Manitoba and Minnesota that led to the death of an Indian couple and their 2 young children in January of 2022. Prosecutors had recommended a nearly 20-year sentence for Patel and nearly 11 years for the driver who was supposed to pick them up in the U.S. Steve Shand from Florida received a 6.5-year sentence. Police in Nova Scotia are asking for the public's help after the disappearance of 2 young children. It's now been almost a month since 6-year-old Lilly Sullivan and her 4-year-old brother Jack were reported missing from their home. After a series of extensive searches, there's been no sign of the siblings. And as Heidi Petracek reports, police do have a new piece of information on the case.
It was from their home in a deeply rural part of Nova Scotia that 6-year-old Lilly Sullivan and her 4-year-old brother Jack seem to have disappeared without a trace. Despite multiple searches, there's been no sign and little information until the Nova Scotia RCMP released an important detail.
We have confirmed that Lilly and Jack were observed in public with family members on the afternoon of May 1st.
The children were reported missing the morning of Friday, May 2nd. Their mother has said they'd been kept home sick that day and the day before. A massive search followed until May 7th, when police announced efforts would be scaled back. Additional searches were held throughout the month. Confirmation they were seen on May 1st helps fill out the timeline.
It just shows continuity of who saw them last. Now, they don't say where they saw them.
Retired Police Staff Sergeant Jim Hoskins isn't involved in the case, but says it's rare for 2 children to go missing together. And since RCMP said early on there was no evidence of abduction.
If it's not a voluntary trek into the woods, you only have one other option if there's no abduction. That option is a criminal investigation.
So far, this remains a missing persons case. RCMP have been tight-lipped, but investigators are now asking for any video, like dashcam footage, taken the week the children went missing along the remote road beside their home, where residents live far apart and the woods are dense.
Everybody should come forward with any footage that they have, anything that's likely. I mean, every tip counts.
Dawna, this case has generated an intense amount of attention online, sparking conspiracy theories and rampant speculation. The RCMP has cautioned the public to stick with credible sources of information as the work to find out what happened to Lilly and Jack Sullivan approaches the 1-month mark. Heidi Petracek in Halifax, thanks. The EU's top diplomat says Israeli strikes in Gaza go beyond what is necessary to fight Hamas as the death toll there continues to mount. Germany's chancellor said on Monday he no longer understands Israel's objectives in Gaza. And today at the UN, the Palestinian envoy broke down in tears. Riyad Mansour was overcome as he described mothers in Gaza cradling their children as they die of starvation. The distribution of aid is not meeting needs. At one distribution center run by a controversial new group backed by the U.S. and Israel, hungry people tried to grab food. Shots were fired and one person was killed. Dozens of others were injured. It's unclear who opened fire. Israel's prime minister says the Israeli army killed the head of Hamas in Gaza, Mohammed Sinwar, in a strike on a hospital earlier this month. He's the younger brother of Yahya Sinwar, considered the architect of the October 2023 attacks on Israel. Constitutional challenge coming up, how Canada's doctors are hoping to protect the rights of transgender people in Alberta. The Canadian Medical Association is challenging a new law in Alberta that limits access to transgender health care. It prohibits doctors from prescribing gender-affirming therapies, including puberty blockers, to people under the age of 16. Heather Urix-West explains why the Medical Association is taking this on.
When Zoe Swafield came out as transgender at 16, her mother says access to supportive medical care likely saved her life.
Once we were able to access gender-affirming care and they were able to get the support they needed, their mental health took a drastic turn for the better, and their life has been incredible since then.
Swafield says her now 22-year-old daughter is thriving, but she worries about other Alberta families who may soon lose access to similar gender-affirming care.
I have families, again, who are trying to decide whether or not
to move out of province before their child enters puberty. I have people who have expressed increased depression, anxiety, suicidality directly as a result of this legislation.
It's why this Calgary family doctor is joining 2 other physicians and the Canadian Medical Association in a legal challenge against an Alberta law. Bill 26, passed last December, prevents doctors from prescribing gender-affirming therapies for those under 16. It also bans doctors from performing gender reassignment surgeries on minors. Though for patients under 18, those procedures are already very rarely done.
For the CMA, this issue is more about physician autonomy in general. We want to put it out to make sure that this doesn't set a precedent where other types of medical decisions, like who can get contraception, or even would we offer knee replacements to people over 70? These are the types of things we don't want government officials to be deciding.
Another legal challenge submitted on behalf of families with transgender children is also before the courts. As a judge considers an injunction application in that case, medical care for transgender youth remains available for now. The Alberta government says the bill is intended to protect youth from potentially irreversible decisions, adding it will vigorously defend its position in court. Heather Yurex-West, Global News, Calgary.
Canada Post and the union representing 55,000 postal workers are back to bargaining. Canada Post says it is laying out what it calls its final offer. It includes a signing bonus, better cost of living allowances, and an end to compulsory overtime. The major sticking points of a 14% wage increase over 4 years and a plan to hire part-time staff for weekend deliveries remain unchanged. The union was prepared to strike last Friday, but opted for a national overtime ban instead. Ahead, pardon me, who President Trump is pardoning now. This is what a collapsing glacier looks like. It happened in Switzerland today, sending a torrent of rock and ice tumbling down the mountain and burying most of the town of Blatten. Authorities had evacuated its 300 residents 10 days ago because of fears the Birch Glacier was disintegrating. 1 person is reported missing. Swiss glaciologists have warned global warming is accelerating the retreat of glaciers. Authorities are calling this the worst-case scenario, saying they aren't aware of any catastrophic collapses like this one. The U.S. Court of International Trade has blocked President Trump's so-called Liberation Day tariffs. It has ruled Trump does not have the authority under the economic emergency legislation to impose the sweeping global tariffs. Trump used the 1977 law, which had never been invoked this way, to put tariffs on multiple countries. The White House responded tonight with a statement saying it is not for unelected judges to decide how to properly address a national emergency. The American president is facing more scrutiny over the use of his presidential powers. Donald Trump pardoned 2 reality TV stars today and a sheriff, all of whom had been convicted of fraud. As Jackson Prosco reports, critics say Trump's pardons are rewarding his political allies and undermining the justice system.
Today, he who has the gold rules.
3 years after they were convicted of tax evasion and bank fraud,
I have the gold. They don't.
Reality TV stars Todd and Julie Chrisley received a presidential pardon, freeing them from their lengthy prison sentences.
Your parents are going to be free and clean, and I hope we can do it by tomorrow.
The fact that the president called me.
The Chrisleys' daughter got the call after months of lobbying, which included speaking at the Republican National Convention.
Due to our public profile and conservative beliefs, they accused my parents of fraud.
Same story for former Virginia Sheriff Scott Jenkins, pardoned this week despite being convicted by a jury of bribery and fraud for accepting cash in exchange for police badges. Trump called him the victim of an overzealous Biden Department of Justice.
Trump's use of the pardon power is part and parcel of his effort to assert an executive power over the law.
Under Trump, the pardon process has been turned on its head. Pardon seekers and their families have spent millions on Trump events, lobbied his inner circle, and tried to pitch themselves to the president.
Trump, although he is using the pardon power in a politicized way, doesn't seem to be facing the same kind of political repercussions for that as prior presidents.
At the Justice Department, the Trump-appointed pardon attorney posted "No MAGA left behind" and is now urging Trump to consider pardons for others, including the 2 men who plotted to kidnap the governor of Michigan. something Trump says he's now considering. Jackson Prosco, Global News, Washington.
The Trump administration has ordered U.S. embassies and consulates around the world to stop scheduling appointments for new student visas.
But I want to make sure that the foreign students are people that can love our country.
The U.S. State Department says it's temporarily halting the interviews for students in exchange visas as it prepares to expand the vetting of applicants' social media accounts. It didn't explain what that vetting might look like, but said it would have significant implications for embassies and consulates. Game face ×2 next. Who this pastor is often mistaken for.
We want the cup!
They sure do. Edmonton Oilers fans are buzzing after last night's victory over the Dallas Stars. The Oilers are just one win away from returning to the Stanley Cup Finals. Oilers fans love to dress up for the games, though one guy in particular is really turning heads. Eric Sorensen explains why.
Welcome, Bethel and friends.
Meet Pastor Matt Ziprick, certainly familiar to members of the Edmonton area Bethel Lutheran Church. 5 years later, the beard is gone, and darned if he doesn't look kind of familiar now to just about everyone in Edmonton. He's getting used to the honks and stares from people telling him,
"You know who you look like? You look an awful lot like Chris Knobloch." Like, yeah, I've been hearing that a fair bit lately.
It's kind of uncanny. The Oilers coach and the local pastor.
That's pretty good, pretty close. I'm trying my best. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Ziprick says people who know the coach say even their composed personalities are similar.
For sure there's some physical characteristics, but maybe the demeanor. A lot of people tell me that I'm quite calm, relaxed.
Famous lookalikes are not new. Remember the guy who sat behind former Ottawa Senators coach Paul McLean.
He sits back there with glasses, same hairstyle, same barber.
And there are always some, like the traveling Yoggers, dressing up to look like someone famous. But Ziprick doesn't need a mustache or a jersey. He just looks the part. He's getting lots of attention at Oilers games now.
Riding the wave, it's been a little wild. Unexpected, wild, and fun.
The real Chris Knobloch took questions today about, the Stanley Cup.
We're going to have to make sure that we're ready from the start.
Thanks a lot, Chris. Safe travels.
What, not one question about his lookalike?
I just want to tell you I'm a big fan.
Pastor Matt shared with his congregation the hope that someday the roles can be reversed.
I'm imagining that some people are going up to Chris Knobloch and saying, "Thanks for the sermon last Sunday." Love Connor McDavid, love Draisaitl.
Does he have a favorite Oiler?
God doesn't have favorites, and neither do I.
Ah, a perfect thought from a pastor or from a coach. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
That is Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Dawna Friesen. Tonight's Air Canada is the Fire Hall in Selkirk, Manitoba, Cultus Lake in BC, and the Northwest Arm Inlet in Halifax. Thanks for watching and hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.